Imam Jamil has a case that is currently open and being investigated in Georgia, but is being held in a facility in Arizona that can't even meet his medical needs. He's been on a list for 2+ years for cataract surgery that, had he gotten, he'd be able to see. He could see before he went on the list. Imam Jamil is blind now. He sits behind bars thousands of miles away with no one. He can't even read his own medicine bottles, let alone legal correspondence. So how is he supposed to prove his innocence? How is he supposed to clear his name? No phone calls allowed, legal calls limited, no treatment. At this point, this has to be a human rights issue. So what are we gonna do, Georgia? You have the power to bring him home, to get him the treatment he needs, and to allow him to partake in his own legal defense. That's not too much to ask. Imam Jamil.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Mamluks podcast. My name is Sim. Along with me are my co-hosts, Mahin and Mort. How y'all doing? Before we get this show started, make sure you click on like and subscribe and leave a comment in the comment section below related to your thoughts with this episode, and hopefully you can show your love and support for Imam Jamil on this very special occasion. Our guest today is Sister Maha and Brother KAIRI, who is Imam Jamil's son.
It's Imam Jamil, right?
Yes,
Imam Jamil. Imam Jamil.
Jamil?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, when we were young, we would always call him Imam Jamil.
Really?
Yeah. Jamil. Oh, it makes more sense. Jamil just rolls off the tongue.
Yeah, like I don't know what kind of like tongue twister you had to do to pull that off, but
yeah,
I was like, what? Like, okay. Anyways,
makes sense.
So Sister Maha, first of all, came recommended by our good friend Ustad Dawud Walid as an attorney working on this case, and Brother KAIRI, being Imam Jamil's son, I figured we can offer some good insights on what's been going on. So,
welcome to the show.
Thank you for having us.
So let's just get started. I always assume that people are idiots like me. So majority of young people that I encounter, they don't know Imam Jamil. And I'm always having to explain to them the significance of this case and how the wrongful incarceration happened. So who better to do it than you, Maha? Let's go ahead and start off with you and explain to younger listeners the significance of this case and who Imam Jamil is as well.
I actually want KAIRI to speak on who his father is. I think
that sounds good. Sounds good. KAIRI, why don't you go start off?
I don't think that I think that it's better to come, because who my father is to me versus who he is to the people at large, I think is a totally different question. I don't have any problem explaining who he is to me. To me, he's the best father I could ask for. He's been able to maintain that relationship with me even from behind the wall. And so, you know, while I tell people on a regular basis, if he were out here with me, I'm sure I'd be a much better human being. Alhamdulillah, I've still had the opportunity to learn from one of the most influential Muslims in this country firsthand. And so he's everything that that we tend to look up to in our leaders that are gone and not with us anymore. You know, he's a master motivator. He's an excellent speaker and orator. He's an organizer. He's a leader in every sense of the word. So he's not just speaking about what we should be doing. You see him acting toward those goals as well. And that's one of the reasons why he was looked at in the way he was by the state. He's a true enemy of the state because he's a true warrior for the people. And that's how we kind of ended up where we are. So, you know, I think Maha would be able to kind of give a different perspective as to why he means much to others. But to me, I'm just blessed to have him as my father, and he's super dad to me. That's just what he means to me.
Yeah, and may Allah preserve him for you. So, you know, KAIRI always shocks me with his humbleness, but Imam Jamil to us is a giant, in every aspect of the word. So, I mean, we can go through what he has done. This is a historic figure, especially now with Judas and the Black Messiah and everybody highlighting Fred Hampton. This Imam Jamil is alive and he is suffering. And if we cry for Fred Hampton, we must cry for Imam Jamil. He was historically the 5th chairman of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee after Stokely Carmichael. He was the Minister of Justice of the Black Panther Party. He's known for his meeting with President Lyndon Johnson discussing civil rights. And it was at a time where it was so crucial in American history and the civil rights movement. It was during the Selma crisis of 1965, and he spoke and advocated through, at that time, nonviolent marches for the right to vote in defiance of segregation. I mean, this is a civil rights giant. If you look at him when he was H. Rap Brown, I mean, KAIRI and I, we remember him as Imam Jamil, right? But he's a giant in every sense of his identity and in his transition and in his growth. So he went on, he continued his fight against Jim Crow. He was the foundation, basically, of the of the Black Lives Matter movement that's so active right now. He contributed to the Voting Rights Act, and ultimately, in his transition to Islam, he facilitated the cleanup of the West End in Atlanta. He changed so many lives there, made that community a hub of, everything revolves around the 5 prayers. He, wrote Revolution of the Book, which everybody should get, everybody should read, everybody should study. His message is so clear. If you internally revolutionize yourself, you can revolutionize, the community that surrounds you. He worked at towards the empowerment of the Bosnians in the Bosnian Task Force against the Bosnian Genocide in the 90s, right? Just before they took him from us. He was outspoken on the liberation of the Palestinian people. So you see this change in Imam Jamil from this civil rights activist and this giant in the civil rights movement and this transition into Islam, and how he then understood the bigger concepts of human rights and the idea that we need to advocate for the justice of all human beings. So here is this giant who advocated for humanity, irrespective of race, irrespective of differences, and we've abandoned him. So absolutely, young people should know who he is, should study him, just like they've studied those civil rights activists who were assassinated and taken from us, right? We don't wait for him to die to celebrate him.
Yeah, well, one of the most important things related to the cases, at least in my mind, was I kind of just put it in the back of my mind and forgot about it because I thought that there was no possibility for him to get out. And if you could help our listeners understand why this possibility is alive, and that we do have something to hope for, and we should, advocate for his release to whatever extent is within our power. Help our listeners understand why it's still within reach.
Okay, so the case is extremely active right now. And it's absolutely critical that people talk about this, that we are consistently vocal about this over time. He has been incarcerated 21 years. And before I go into that, I think it would be a good time to maybe talk about the confession. So essentially, the underlying issue in this case is that we have Otis Jackson, who has confessed to this crime, who has consistently confessed to this crime for the past 21 years. And the government has just refused to properly investigate that. So I know there's a video clip of him confessing. I think this would be a good time to insert that.
Before you start, though, can you actually clarify what the actual charge was? What's the crime that Imam Jamil was accused of? I think we kind of skipped over that.
So it's an accusation of a homicide of a law enforcement officer. So that night there were 2 officers that were shot.
Okay.
Is essentially what the allegation is.
And these two officers, they were just going into his grocery store. Imam Jamil was a grocery store owner, and did they go into the shop and get shot, or were they already shot and they were seeking assistance? That's what is at least not clear from everyone's perspective, and the authorities just kind of filled in the blank and just assumed that he was the one who shot them, right?
Kairi, do you want to narrate it, because you do a good job narrating that night?
Yeah, sure. No, they never. Well, it was first of all, just so that people understand, this was supposedly two officers coming to serve a warrant for a missed traffic violation. Not even, this wasn't, so it wasn't a crazy crime or anything like that. He missed court because it was a snow day, and so they decided to call on him call at his store in the middle of the night. And so essentially what happened is they pulled up. Two police officers would have pulled up and gone to knock, or before they got to knock on his store door, they would run into this man, Otis Jackson, who was also just so happened to be trying to call on my father, which wasn't strange. That's what everyone did. They know that his store was on the corner in the West End. So if they came through, they would stop by and reach out and give salams and have conversation or whatever may be the case. And so that is where the altercation took place, in front of, or on the side of the store, and the altercation.
Kairi, you kind of broke up. In any kind of murder investigation, there's the obvious question related to motive. What was the motive provided by the authorities for Imam Jamil to shoot these two officers in cold blood?
I don't think there was ever a motive provided outside of they were here to serve him with they were here to serve a warrant. And I think that's one of the reasons why what the warrant was for was glanced over, because there would have been no reason, even if he were to have been arrested, to commit a homicide for a traffic ticket warrant. Like, that's a couple days in jail at most, if you have to go to jail at all.
Well, it doesn't make sense, because
that would have been the only.
Because if he was evading arrest, why would he be sitting at his grocery store? If he was evading his warrant to be served to him, that would be the last place where you would want any kind of officer or someone who's serving the court, trying to apprehend you. So why would you be just waiting around? It doesn't make sense. It doesn't fit that narrative that they're trying to portray, that he was trying to prevent himself from getting arrested.
Another thing that I remember hearing about this like back like ISNA days, like in the late or like early 2000s. I remember people were coming. I don't know if you were there, but I remember when this thing first kicked off, there was T-shirts that were being sold, Free Imam Jamil. I think there was a website, is that freeimamjamil.org, and I think that was on. I remember hearing about that back almost 20 years ago. Like, I mean, literally after, just pretty much after, I think post 9/11, it was still going on. And I think that environment even made it like more difficult to get justice, because there was already a bias against not only him being black, but also being a Muslim on top of that after 9/11. But I was reading through some of that, and it was funny to me because Otis Jackson and all that, like I was reading through some of this, and apparently the officer describes a man as having gray eyes, and that the perpetrator was shot. And Imam Jamil doesn't have gray eyes, right? And he wasn't injured.
And that he was 5'9", and so, Imam Jamil is 6'5".
Kind of hard to goof that up. You know what I mean? Like, it's a big height difference. So, just to understand clearly, there was two officers. One of them got shot. Both of them got shot, right? And one of them died.
One died, and one survived, allegedly.
One survived, and one served as a witness saying that Imam Jamil shot him. Is that what he's saying?
What happened was while he was laying in the hospital bed, they brought him pictures of that moment, like 6 different people. He started pointing out people, but at the same time, during his or description of what happened, he mentions that the person before showing him these pictures, the person was whatever height and had gray eyes and was shot. And then all of a sudden,
Right, and
Well,
picks-
both officers,
yeah.
both officers, the surviving officer and the one who passed, they both attested to shooting or wounding the perpetrator.
Okay. Right.
right,
And
you know, there's
one of our complaints is that during the lineup, the wounded officer was on morphine and those kind of things as well, and was kind of led to pick Imam Jamil out of a photo lineup.
Yeah. I mean, and during like traumatic moments like that, I don't see how people are able to correctly identify exactly the version of events that transpired. But it's just, is there any explanation onto why Otis Jackson may have wanted to shoot these officers to begin with? Is there a motive for him that was provided?
yeah, he's being
His
monitored.
motive is not. His also parole, and so he had an ankle monitor on, and he would have been in violation of his parole should they have run his information, and so he didn't want to go back for his, I forget how long his stint would have been, which he ended up having to do anyway, and he's still doing. He's inside right now, but his that was one of his motivations. And then the motivation that he gave was also that he was a part of an organization that was anti-establishment, anti-police, and so engaging with police was just a part of his part of his creed, so to speak. Yeah. So that he did what he does.
I have a question. So some people who are familiar with the case might have read through some of these things. So as you know, like apparently they I don't know if this car belongs to Imam Jamil, but there was a black Mercedes involved in this whole thing, right? So one of
Absolutely.
the case, I mean, I guess one of the evidence is, quote unquote, that they bring forward is that Imam Jamil's Mercedes had a bullet hole in it or something like that. So how does that play into all this? Like, I mean, is that something that was related to this case and used to convict him as evidence that he was there, or that his vehicle was used, or how does that work in this?
No, absolutely. They used it as evidence, but we aren't. Even my father, he has his only statement that he made as far as how things happened. He admits to his car being there, but that's not strange. It was Isha time. He went to Isha to lead, Isha prayer, and afterwards he admits that he drove off because of gunfire, and so his car got hit in that altercation. He didn't know what that altercation may have been, but he admits that his car got hit.
Oh, so he just probably thought it was something with like violence in the street, and he's speeding away, getting away from the violence, and in the process, his car gets hit with bullets, essentially.
That was his exact words. He thought it was gang related.
Right. Okay, that makes sense now. Because I was reading through that and I'm like, well, how did they piece this together? Like, how did they like equate that, and how did this happen? Because in my mind, I'm just thinking, well, okay, well, there's a car there and it's his. I thought maybe his car was stolen or something like that. So it makes sense now. So he was driving away and the car caught the bullet. Okay.
But before we go to the video, like, Maha had mentioned the movie, the recent Judas and the Black Messiah, right? And in that movie, you see the case of Fred Hampton, who was like essentially assassinated by police in Chicago, right? And so how much of this, like, would you say is the fact that he was part of the Black Panther Party, and then his work being, I guess, KAIRI had mentioned, an enemy of the state, or I don't know, one of you guys mentioned that, like, that was like, hey, this is an opportune moment for us to get him.
Well, it's interesting because they named the movie Judas and the Black Messiah. And there's actually a document, a CIA document, which was, with the launching of COINTELPRO, and their words exactly were, we have to stop the rise of a Black Messiah. And funnily enough, Fred Hampton's name wasn't in that document, but my father's name was in that document, which is one of the reasons why I think they decided to lead that movie off with a clip of my father speaking, which we appreciate the homage that was being paid there. But they recognized my father back in the 60s as a potential leader for the Black people. And so this vendetta didn't start recently. It's 60 plus years old, and it's very, very much still alive. And we can see it in his treatment while he's doing this unjust time. Like, for instance, the fact that it took us 2 years for him to get medical treatment for his eyes. And the optometrist, we found out, was on site the entire time. So they just decided to let him go blind because they hate him, not because of the crime he committed. And so very, very much so, this is a personal vendetta between him and the federal government. Even the fact that the federal government has him in their custody right now. He didn't commit any federal crimes. He's a Georgia state prisoner, but he's in federal custody because this is personal.
And they make the claim that he's in federal custody because they quote unquote don't have the facilities to treat to house a dangerous quote unquote criminal. So they moved him to federal, right? Is that what they did? Their claim is?
Right.
They said that he's high profile.
He's too high profile.
Yeah, high profile, right? So, So it's real. Just before we get into the other things, so I'm a little bit curious in some ways. So during this, during this time period, obviously it's a hotbed time period with the, Black Panthers being around, and we know that the FBI was profiling everybody and trying to gather information on the different people that are affiliated with the Black Panthers and also other people. But at some point, did he? I believe. Can you correct me if I'm wrong? Was there there was some unofficial kill list and I or something of that nature I remember reading about, and I think Hoover or somebody wanted your father dead, to be honest. I don't know if you've heard about that, or there was something I was reading about that, and I wanted to know if there's any truth to that claim.
No, the document that I referred to, it wasn't an unofficial list, it's an official list. I don't remember everyone that was on it. I have to get it to you, but it's the COINTELPRO document, and the words used in the document where we have to neutralize these individuals.
Right.
Everyone on that list is dead or in jail.
So neutralize the keyword for kill in the government language. Neutralize the asset.
Right. Right.
Another thing a lot of people need.
The three are J. Edgar Hoover specifically called out H. Rap Brown, Stokely Carmichael, Elijah Muhammad, and Maxwell Stanford as targets of the program.
Wow.
Yeah, the United States is known, and it's a well-established principle within American policy, is to set an example with people who they considered revolutionary figures, people who the state considered a threat in any way.
Disruptive.
And so even though they may have not been able to get Imam Jamil in his more active days in the 60s and 70s, but they were able to set a lesson or set an example and show people that, hey, look, we don't forget we have long memory, in effect.
Well, it's interesting. I kind of wanted to point out a few of the issues with this arrest. So first of all, KAIRI spoke about the initial arrest and the warrant. And what's interesting about the underlying accusations and that missed court hearing is that ultimately that case was thrown out and found to be a violation of Imam Jamil's Fourth Amendment right to be free from unlawful search and seizure. So the underlying allegation in and of itself should never have been an issue. And when you go through how egregious this case is and you kind of line it all up, the description was completely off, and I know KAIRI went through this, but 5'8" or 5'9" and gray eyes. The FBI most wanted poster from when Imam Jamil was H. Rap Brown shows they specifically say his eyes are brown. He's 6'5". They were adamant, both officers were adamant that they shot the assailant. Otis Jackson has the scars to show that he was shot. The ballistics, you talked a little bit about the ballistics and the car. What was later found is that the ballistics or the firearm examiner, the ballistics expert, was later fired for faulty ballistics and has engaged in faulty ballistics in multiple cases since she was fired. They're starting to discover that this was a consistent act that she did. The confession, there's the confession you're going to play, but Otis has multiple written confessions. There's no gun residue on Imam Jamil when they pick him up. He never shot a gun. There's no DNA on the site putting Imam Jamil there. There's no fingerprints at the scene putting him there. There was blood that they refused to, or they tested and they said, after they were sure it was Imam Jamil's blood, they later tested it and said, oh no, it's inconclusive. And they never tested that blood against Otis. I mean, and as far as the FBI involvement, you had an agent, that was a state issued warrant. You have an FBI agent who decides, no, he's going to intervene in this. He's going to ride from Florida to Alabama, and he's going to do it in his own car. And all of a sudden, he has an interest in this case. You know, we're grateful that Imam Jamil is alive, because it is clear that they didn't want him to be alive. And the reason he's alive is because Alabama law enforcement was involved, and they took custody of him. But if it was the FBI who got him, surely he would not be with us. So, I mean, the evidence on this case and the derelict constitutional violations, the Fourth Amendment constitutional violation, the Fifth Amendment constitutional violation in the closing argument of the prosecution, the appellate court's description of the prosecutor's behavior, it's all unacceptable. And we have not advocated enough for him.
Yeah. You know, I had an opportunity to read some of his works and some quotes, and you can, I think people who read through some of his writings can understand why people in the government think that he could have been a threat to their traditional establishment. I mean, for example, quotes like, individuals don't create rebellions, conditions do, right? I mean, that's basically alluding to the fact that, hey, people are unhappy. And when you have unhappiness, and he's talking about it, and he's talking about the unfair conditions of his people, naturally the government's going to feel nervous. And I don't think there's any doubt about that. But I have a question about the Otis Jackson. Did that description match up with him as far as the height and the color of the eyes? And does he have gray eyes, and is he that height?
Yes.
He is that. He is that height. His eyes are. It's hard to see in this clip that we're about to play, but they're not normal eyes. Like, they're like a little. So sure, maybe, but you know, was he shot? Yes. Does he fit was he the right height? Yes. His eye color at nighttime could it have been misconstrued for gray? I'm sure.
But that's what's crazy to me.
Nighttime, like, how would you pick that up?
Yeah, how would you? And it ain't like you're just walking up to the guy and having eye-to-eye contact with a gun in your hand. Like, you guys are in a fight, in a shootout. Like, you're gonna be at some distance. At nighttime, I don't know how you could tell his eyes were gray. Or what color his eyes were in any case. I mean, I don't even know. Mind-boggling.
Well, the other thing about Imam Jamil is, even if you were close to him, he wears medicated sunglasses, even at nighttime. And if he doesn't have them on, it wouldn't have been much of a gunfight for him anyway, because he can't see. So it's like, if you met him with glasses on that you couldn't see through anyway.
And there's no mention of glasses at all in any of the descriptions. No. So, I mean, just knowing your father, it would be impossible for him to see at nighttime without these glasses.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Right.
And, you know, it's also
to drive, let alone be effective at anything else.
Right.
Yeah, they were serving this warrant the night before Eid. So that's kind of just to give you an idea of their intentions, you know?
Right. Do you guys want to play the audio from Otis Jackson?
I'll tell Sim which one it is.
Yeah.
Hold on, give me 1 second here.
We have a cue. Yeah, I think that'll be important here because, like you guys mentioned, this man has admitted numerous times. Yes, that's the one.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, he's admitted numerous times that he has done this, and nothing. Yeah, but go ahead and.
In 20 years, he hasn't wavered in his testimony. We've had the
can you go to
documents.
2 minutes?
We've just never been able to hear his
we're
voice
going 2
or
minutes?
see his
Yeah,
face.
scroll
as
at
he
2 minutes,
tells
I think.
Mr. Santos, based on his evaluation, did Dr. Hudson ultimately opine that you demonstrated a factual and rational appreciation of the legal process with no evidence of a mental illness or intellectual deficit, further finding that you have an agenda for providing testimony which is consistent with your philosophies, lifestyle, and life history? Is that all correct?
Yes, sir.
Crazy what you can find out when you ask an expert. What's also interesting is that though the description given by the victims was not accurate in describing Imam Jamil AL-AMIN, it did describe someone else, the primary descriptors being 5'8", 5'9", with cold gray eyes. Now, I don't know if Mr. Santos has cold gray eyes, but I wonder how tall he is.
How tall are you?
5'8".
Another element of the description given was that the shooter was wounded. My father was not wounded, and other officers attested to the fact that the victims were indeed marksmen. So if they said they wounded the shooter was wounded. However, Mr. Santos was wounded, but I'm not going to play a short clip of him saying he was wounded. From this point forward, I'll just play his entire testimony about that night, followed by a reading of the written confessions he's provided in the past.
From October of 13th of 1997 until December 22nd of 2000, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Do those dates.
Yes, sir. October 13th, 1997 to December 22nd of 2000.
Yes, sir.
All right. Isn't it true that during that incarceration, you contacted the Federal Bureau of Investigations and told them that you had committed a murder and were involved in the shooting of a cop in March of 2000 in Atlanta, Georgia?
Yes.
You did?
Yes.
All right. And you couldn't have because you were in prison in Nevada, right?
No, sir. I got out of prison in 2000 in February. I was on house arrest when the murder took place. You might want to check that out. I was on house arrest. I was staying at 2380 Jernigan Street, Southwest Atlanta.
You just said that you were incarcerated in Las Vegas in 1997 through December of 2000.
I went back to prison after that shooting. I was violated and sent back to prison after the police shooting. That's why it says BP by my name. That's parole violation. If you look at the photo, it says BP beside my number. That means parole violation.
You violated your probation because you went back to prison.
Exactly. I violated after the shooting.
You were interviewed by the Federal Bureau of Investigations for that out there in that Nevada prison, were you not, in July
Yes, sir.
of that year?
Yes, sir.
And he ruled you out and said you did not commit that murder in Las Vegas, correct?
I don't know what
that murder in Atlanta.
I have no idea what his conclusion was, sir.
All right, you weren't arrested for it, were you?
No, sir, I was not.
In fact, another person was tried and convicted.
JAMIL AL-AMIN, yes, sir.
Yes, sir. And once again, it seems to me like you were getting a lot of
I was
high
shot
profile.
that day.
I'm sorry?
I was shot March of 2000. It happened March 17th of 2000.
Your Honor, we can take a break right now. Come back.
Okay. All right, we'll take a 10 minutes.
Wow, that's pretty powerful. I mean, for me to hear that, and it's funny to me because I'm thinking about something very clear here. And do you guys remember the Central Park 5? That back when, and then the shooter admits, or the assailant admits it from jail that, hey, it was me while I was out, and all of a sudden it's just, everyone's like, oh, cool, these kids are innocent. That should have been the automatic response when this guy's telling you, hey, I'm giving you dates when I was released. He's educating the, I guess, I don't know if it's the prosecutor or the attorney, whatever attorney that was, but that, hey, that's why I was out on parole. You can see by my name, the record indicates it. I was out there, and he gives the address where he was staying and talks about pretty much details on details, which is crazy to me because I even remember reading his testimony saying that he was even going door to door looking for a ride because he was shot. And like I don't know if those were witnesses that were brought in later on, but apparently people would have seen that happen.
Wait, in what context were we seeing Otis Jackson's testimony right now?
I think they're reopening, appealing Imam Jamil's current situation, right?
No, it was actually,
Maha, can you
No, it was very strange. It was a totally unrelated case, another murder case, and they were trying to use my father's case to discredit him and say that he's untruthful in his history in his life. And so, but the second they asked him about it, he was able to then elaborate on the record in a totally unrelated case so that we would get another. Now we have a video confession. So up until this point, we've only ever had written. So he's actively and proactively trying to assist us and help. Hey, it's me. Like, he's waving his hand as many different ways as he can, from signed affidavits to handwritten letters to now offering the information up on the stand in an unrelated trial because he understands that now that's on the record. And so, I don't know what else he can do at this point.
What was he referring to when he was saying that I was shot that day? That police officers that were...
He meant
the altercation.
In the altercation shot him?
Right. He was saying that he was basically confirming that they said they shot the assailant and I was shot. And like you just mentioned, there were there was eyewitness testimony that someone was knocking door to door. People were saying they didn't let him in, but that someone was knocking door to door saying that he was shot. And so he's just saying, look, you're saying I couldn't have done it, but I got shot that night. So I can, so what happened there proved that, that's basically him saying I did it. And I not only matched the description, I matched the statements of the officers saying that they shot me because they shot me.
So I have a question for you, KAIRI. Has Imam JAMIL been shot at any point in his entire lifetime? Like, could they misconstrue like bullet wounds in his own body for what happened here? Because Imam JAMIL was not wounded at this time. We know that, right? That was very clear. But
no, they even they acquiesced that he wasn't wounded in this incident, and so that's why when the blood was tested against him, it didn't come back a match, and so they had to then go to, well, the blood was inconclusive because when they caught him, he wasn't wounded, and so that ruined that part of the story, and so it kind of had to be swept under the rug, like, oh well, maybe they didn't shoot him. So they did.
I have a question. So if there's blood, was there any blood residue at the site, at the scene of the crime? Was there blood that they took samples from over there?
Yeah, there was a.
Okay, so
yeah, that's where the blood came from.
So my understanding is that you're saying that the test was inconclusive, meaning they couldn't get an accurate sample for whatever, maybe old technology. Is it possible now to have that sample retested? Is that still an option for them to test between Imam JAMIL's and that blood sample they had from the crime scene?
Yeah, that brings us.
We're hoping so.
Okay.
Yeah. So right now it's being looked at by the Conviction Integrity Unit, and the challenge in this is that this is a 21-year-old case, and they're trying to locate all the evidence. So it would be great if that evidence is there so that we can test against it. That would be ideal. And, to look at the ballistics again and to just look at this case with fresh eyes, because this is a wrongful conviction. So we're hoping that's the case.
Where's Otis Jackson right now?
He's incarcerated.
Okay, so that's kind of, it's similar to the whole, the Central Park 5, like, because sometimes people wonder, like, why so he's incarcerated already. He's like, hey, I've done this. It's not like anything he's already incarcerated. So it's like, he doesn't have an incentive to, like, keep the cover up going, is basically correct.
Well, but the thing about him is incarcerated, free, it don't matter. He's been saying this for 20 years, like since day one. I actually have to find the clip again, but there's a news clip of the ABC interviewed him when they were to the lead up to my father's case, just as a random coincidence. He was the member of the Muslim community in Atlanta that they found, and they asked him on camera, are you sure? Are you 100% certain that he didn't do this crime? And he said, yes, I'm 100% certain he did not commit this crime. And it's like, it's almost shocking to watch him say it and then to hear him confess later, because it's like, that's the only way you could have any certainty of this, is if you're the one who did it. And then it turns out you were. And he, like he said, in 2000, I think 1 or 2, he wrote his first confession to the FBI.
And so Otis is Muslim?
And since then...
Did you say Otis is Muslim as well?
Kinda.
Okay,
Kinda.
So I have a question, though. I'm trying to think, through the mind or lens of a skeptic. So is there any relationship prior to this event between Imam JAMIL and Otis? Like, could they say, oh, he's just trying to take the fall for the Imam because they're close, or something of that nature? Like, is there any relationship?
No, the funny thing about their relationship is Otis tells you himself that night was the night he was trying to meet the Imam. He was like, meet him for the first time to discuss with him. Yeah, they don't know each other. It wasn't a relationship that they had there. He was like, I found out where his community was, and I went to go see if I could catch him so that I could talk to him about what my gang does. Like, yeah, he wanted to talk to him about turning gangs into like cleaning up communities and things like that. And so, no, they didn't have a relationship at all. This was just, he was giving it a shot in the dark that maybe he could run into him. So
what I'm gathering from is it seems like this Otis was trying to make his way down to the Imam's Masjid in the area, and probably somewhere in the process, he had a run-in with the law, and he was terrified that he was violating parole. So this altercation happens between the police and him, And then in the process, Imam Jamil is leaving from Salatul Isha. He's driving in his car during the shootout, minding his business, thinking it's gang stuff going on, and the bullets hit the car, and the rest is what you talked about. So essentially, he's never met the Imam. So this guy probably freaked out for violating his parole and just kind of got an altercation.
KAIRI, can you explain to me how, I know some places, at least from whatever I read, they said the weapons were found in his store, in Imam Jamil's store. Is that true at all, or no?
No, the weapons. No, that's not true at all. The weapons were found in Alabama, but we don't know whose weapon. Again, there was no physical evidence linking the Imam to these weapons, and the ballistics tests that were done on these weapons were likely faulty. And so we're trying to retest the ballistics as well, but they never even went so far as to prove whose weapons these were. And they couldn't, at least definitely not for the handgun, because the handgun had no fingerprints on it, which is highly unlikely if it was just used in a double shooting / homicide. So, it's very strange, but no, and we attest that the weapons were placed by this FBI agent who inserted himself into this case, not just because the local police department mentioned that these weapons looked placed, but because this FBI agent actually has a history of placing weapons on the scene of crimes in the past, except in that instance, he shot the perpetrator, or the alleged perpetrator, in the back of the head before placing a weapon at the scene, and that weapon also had no fingerprints. And so he has a history of this kind of behavior. He admitted to being alone at the place where the weapons were found in Alabama. And then once again, the Alabama Police Department attested to, there's no way that somebody dropped that. They look deliberately placed there. And so there was never a connection made to the weapons, and there was never really proof of the weapons being the weapons that were used in the commission of the crime.
They placed the weapons where? In the store or in Alabama?
No, in the woods in Alabama.
In the woods in Alabama.
In the backwoods
and
of Alabama.
it wasn't found, right, and they weren't found the same day that they found Imam Jamil.
Okay.
The agent went back the next day, and then somehow the weapons appeared.
So I have a question. Has Imam Jamil ever claimed these weapons and said these were his, or does he have these weapons, or was there anything that he made as far as owning to them or anything like that?
No, he's never made a statement claiming that those were his weapons.
Okay, so
the only conversation I've ever had with him about weapons, because it was known that Imam Jamil had, weapons at times, like in his life. Yeah. And so the only conversation we ever had about the weapons was, the semi-automatic weapon couldn't have been mine, because my semi-automatic weapon isn't a fireable weapon. It's inoperable. And so if they ran the ballistics on my weapon, they would see that it's inoperable. It couldn't be fired. And so it's impossible that those weapons were mine at all. And the reason why the FBI agent is so important is because he's the only person who came from Georgia to Alabama by himself. And so the likelihood that the weapons that were used were in Atlanta is high, because somebody just got into a shootout in the field across the street from the masjid. And so when you run off because you've been shot, you likely left the weapons on the scene. And if they are the weapons that were used, it's not a far-fetched situation. It was a crime scene.
Right. So from what I'm gathering is that the ballistics, the woman that ran the ballistics is in question, and the FBI agent that located these weapons is in question based on previous, I guess, events that they've been part of, where they've been caught falsifying or lying about evidence. My question is, was it ever brought up in court that it was odd that an FBI agent drove by himself? I mean, did the FBI know what he was doing? Were they aware of his movements? And then was it just off the radar and like kind of AWOL, and then just finds, oh guys, I found the weapons? Like, I mean, was there any conversation about that in the trial?
Yeah. He was actually caught lying on the stand. We asked him if he was at any point alone, or would have had an opportunity to, place weapons, and his response was no, he wasn't. But then later in the line of questioning, he mentioned that at the fence, which was where the guns were actually found, when they were jumping the fence, he got hung up on the fence, and thus, was separated from the group for a minute. And so he was caught up in that lie. But it was very interesting. Before his testimony even began, the FBI locked the courtroom with the judge and the attorneys and kind of laid out for them what line of questioning they were allowed to ask him, period, before we even got started. And one of the things we weren't allowed to discuss was his history of placing weapons at scenes and that murder that took place when he shot that the other man.
Can they do that legally?
We weren't even allowed to breach that subject. So.
Can that happen legally? Can they?
They
stop?
did it.
But is it allowed? Like, can that be challenged? Is that even? I mean, is that legal?
It's like they can be, but they're above the law at this point, right? I think,
I'm
sure
they did it like it was legal, and it happened.
And I'm sure that FBI officer served time for perjury, right?
That's a good joke.
No, of course not.
Of course not.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I mean that's just like so.
It was just like a oops.
Oh, like yeah,
My
like,
bad.
yeah, but like that's that's what else can you say at this point?
Just another boo boo.
Right. So right now it's like it's been 20
Right.
years. This gets more alluded to. This is something we've been. I don't know if we were talking Mort and I the other day before about this podcast. Like we were at ISNA convention like 2016 or 17. We're outside in Chicago, and I don't know if it was more. But there were people still fighting for it, like on the talking about Imam Jamil. The mainstream organizations seem to have like kind of like, all right, it's like he's a forgotten man in that way, right? You have small, pockets of the community. What it seems like it's like people like got riled up about it after 9/11, like when it happened, but then it's kind of like, all right, well, it is what it is. They kind of like just kind of forgot about it. That's what happens, right?
Honestly, from what I can tell, I don't think the Muslim community really, at least around outside of maybe Atlanta, but I think it didn't really make it a loud uproar. I learned about that from ISNA because the brother was selling T-shirts. That's why I knew about it. But I know for most people, they don't know who Imam Jamil is. Like I mean, and I think part of the reason, I'm not blaming them for this, but I think part of the reason was that post 9/11, everybody was terrified of what's going to happen to us as Muslims. Like everyone, they kind of had this fear factor hanging over, and I think they were like, hey, we don't want to be associated with anybody who might be like this or like that. They use fear tactics to try to pull away support from the Imam. But I remember even at some point, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think at one point even ISNA did not want like this kind of political attention about this, and even people like Dr. Afia Siddiqui, they didn't want them to be part of this any mainstream platform. Hey, we don't want to have this negative light. We're cool just being under the radar, and this is going to bring negative light onto us if we endorse these kinds of cases. So was that a problem that you ran into? I mean, was that something that did in fact take place?
Absolutely.
And it's still a problem. I mean, we
Absolutely.
have to change.
No, yeah, it's still a problem. Like we're dealing with it now.
Yeah. I think
we have to change the narrative. We have to change the narrative. We have a duty, to speak out against these injustices. And we need this needs more attention from the national Muslim organizations. What they don't realize is that you cannot be driven by fear, because at the end of the day, this is setting a very dangerous precedence. Like, this is our leader, Imam Luqman was a leader, and our leaders need to be treated with a certain level of dignity and respect and, basic human rights. So we have to change the narrative and not act from a place of fear.
Oh, yeah, I mean, Mort brought up a great point. Even the situation with Afia Siddiqui, who has been missing for the better part of 20 years, you can't be relegating these issues to the ISNA, ICNA, Bazaar, And I'm mentioning them specifically because I know you guys aren't, but I am. Because
I'll call them out. Yeah. I mean.
Yeah. So, no, the situation is that you can't be. Today you're selling them out. Tomorrow it can be you or your kids. And I'm speaking to the people who organize these conferences or who are responsible for some of the talking points and some of the subject matter related to the discussions that are happening on the podium.
Yeah, I mean, I'll give you an example. I mean, you may be familiar with this, but there's a Sheikh Ali At-Tamimi. He was incarcerated for years, and alhamdulillah, now they finally overturned it, but they gave him 11 life sentences. And finally, I mean, and no one was talking about him. It happened by the qadr of Allah. I mean, but it's sad that the Muslim community has abandoned people that are innocent people. It seems like we buy the narrative that they give us that, oh, they're guilty, and we somehow are timid and afraid to address the issue and say, hey, and it's funny to me because there are people out there who commit mass murders and shootings, and they're being walked around with bulletproof vests, and they're being escorted into prisons.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like with top care, and people who deserve, who are community leaders, who have literally been vital, instrumental, people in the civil rights movement. We're talking about people that were marching for and advocates for integration into schools, and they're being treated like animals and dogs. I mean, in prison, it's mind-boggling to me simply because you're afraid to say that, hey, he's an imam, he's a leader. Even if he did a mistake, I'm not saying he did, but even if he did, he's still a human being. He's still our leader. People are not infallible. We don't just abandon people the minute they make a mistake, if they did, even if that's the case, right? But in this case, we don't believe he did. But that, to me, is just the problem as a community. This issue, to me, is a community issue because we're scared. We're not standing up for what we believe in. We're not standing up for what we should be standing up. We're willing to stand up for people like George Floyd, which is, I'm not taking a shot at him, but what about Imam Jamil? He's your people. He's from you. Like, you know what I mean? And then that's what I get from this, to be honest.
Absolutely.
And the thing is, I was gonna say, like,
and with him,
go ahead, Kairi.
With him, it's always it's even more interesting because we talk about the ISNAs and ICNAs, and you talk about the conferences back in the day where he was an attendee. He wasn't an attendee. He was the keynote. If there was an issue, he was the keynote. If you needed to raise money, he was who they called. And so now that he's calling on them, their silence is deafening.
But I think it's even under like U.S. prison regulations, I would have to assume that, like, even if people are guilty prisoners, people who are they still get like the basic treatment. Like, you're talking about being deprived of health care, right? That happened to Ali Tamimi as well, right?
Sheikh Abdurrahman, many people.
Yeah. So on that note, I understand. He's lost his sight. I was hoping I'm going to tell Sim to play the clip. I'll tell you which number that is. Go ahead and let me find your. Go ahead and play clip number 2. This is Imam Jamil, a recent phone conversation y'all had from a few months back.
Number 2.
Stay strong and that you hold on. And, you have instilled in us so much hope in everything that you have taught through your writings, through your teachings. And we want you to remember that you are not forgotten and that we are here on the outside trying to do everything we can.
Keep going. No, keep going.
Oh, okay.
Finish the whole clip. You gotta skip ahead again.
Yeah.
I actually.
Yeah.
I appreciate everything that y'all doing. But the prophet used to say, peace and blessings be upon him. He said, struggle is my manner, devotion is my art, and my pleasure is my prayer. He called Islam this affair. Following this affair is constant struggle. So whenever y'all do it, Allah tells it, and I appreciate everything that you're doing.
All right, that's us. That's it.
All right, that's it.
Yep.
That's powerful. I mean, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala release him quickly from jail and give us, the motivation to do this rapidly. Because, honestly, this is appalling for if anyone's a Muslim American watching this, you should feel a sense of collective obligation to do something about it. That's just the bottom line.
Yeah, which brings us to the action plan. So this case is twofold. Right now, the Conviction Integrity Unit is looking at the case, and they have the power to do one of 3 things: either recommend a sentence reduction and release him, recommend a new trial or recommend his release and exonerate him. And, you know, we're praying that they do the third one, they do the right thing. So we're asking that everybody go to freeimamjamil.com, and there's a list of action items there. The first one is a letter asking to transfer him from Arizona to Georgia. And, you know, that's critical for so many reasons. Number one, you touched on it a little bit, his medical condition. He is 77 years old. He's extremely fragile. He cannot see, and he has a list, a long list of medical ailments. And the federal government has labeled him as needing a level 4 facility to meet his medical needs, and he's still in a level 3. So they're not meeting his medical needs. And I know KAIRI touched on it a bit, where, you know, we've been fighting to get him this eye surgery. Come to find out that it was right on site. The examination that he needed, the pre-op examination, was there right on site. And they've delayed this, and they forced our hand to file a lawsuit in federal court demanding that he receive the necessary medical treatment. Mm-hmm. Why does it have to be, you know, why do we have to go to that extent to get his basic medical treatment? And why, as a community, have we not advocated and monitored his medical needs and his medical treatment and been proactive in ensuring that he receives that? So there's this federal case pending regarding his eye surgery, his cataract surgery. And on the other side, it's the Conviction Integrity Unit reviewing this case. So this is a very active case. And that first letter is asking for his transfer to Georgia so he can receive proper medical treatment, so he can be closer to counsel, so he can be closer to his family. He's 77 years old. This man is not a threat. He has never been a threat. They transferred him out of Georgia when they found the inmates flocking to him. He inspires people. That's his crime. He empowers people and he inspires people. And when you have inmates flocking to him and asking that he be their voice, there's a sense of fear. Every revolutionary is feared, you know, and that's what we have here. We have a revolutionary who is basically in a cage, and there's this gag order that is, it's an unwritten gag order. Historians have tried to access him. The media has tried to access him, and they do not give access. Like, we have to do better. We have to do better. We can't allow them to erase his history. We can't allow them to medically neglect him. We can't allow them to violate his 8th Amendment and treat him with cruel and unusual punishment. And we have to demand that they look at every aspect of this case again. They must free him. Right. I mean, I couldn't have put it any better. I mean, it's a demand, and without offering him these basic services, it's pretty much torture. That's what they're doing. If you don't offer these basic human rights that you offer to your so-called alleged enemy combatants across the world, and you won't offer the same treatment to a U.S. citizen, you're torturing him. That is just the bottom line. I do have a question though. Is if he were to receive the cataract surgery, would he be able to see it all, or is it beyond repair now? Yeah. So initially in 2017, there was fear of glaucoma, and the prison from 2017 until 2021 failed to test him properly for glaucoma, which would have been an irreversible eye condition. Mm-hmm. Right now, we don't have confirmation, but we're hoping, and we're hopeful, KAIRI knows firsthand better than I do, we're hopeful that it is reversible cataract, Inshallah. But we don't have full written confirmation. If it's just cataract and it's not glaucoma, then inshallah, Imam Jamil can see again. But we need it to be timely. Like, how long is he supposed to stay blind when... Yeah, it's not cool to be not be able to see. Right, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I have parents that are elder and they've had it and they've described it as this. It's just, you can't see. Like, it's just, I mean, it's a life hindering condition. Like, you can't resume normal activities. You can't read, you can't see. And it's difficult in that age as well, too, when you need all your faculties as much as you can, especially being in the environment that he's in. So, may Allah make it easy for him. And, you know, may he give his vision back to his eyes, inshallah.
Are there any immediate dates we should be looking out for in the future? Anything where, anything in the timeline that we can kind of keep an eye on and work our advocacy around those dates?
like key moment for an appeal or a hearing or something?
Well, right now we're in the middle. Right now we're in the middle of it, and so as Sister Maha stated, the people who are doing the review, like currently doing the review, if they came to a conclusion tomorrow, they could release it. And so our campaign is, the timeline is like now until we hear from them. Like we need them to hear us as a people showing our concern currently. Like right now, it's very time is of the essence.
So they need pressure
right now. Like we have some yeah, just because the biggest thing that we're trying to make people understand is this won't be won because of the law. If it would have, we would have won a long time ago. This will be won because people show that they care. And his own people, us, we have to do a better job of just showing that we care. We've seen the kind of movements it takes for change. You know, we've seen the George Floyd movement. Even we've seen the Meek Mill movement. You know, we see what it takes. And we need that kind of noise for Imam Jamil, like now, while they're listening and they're looking to do something about it before they realize,
right. What kind of support are you guys getting from like the non-Muslim community on this case?
I would imagine they're doing more than we are.
It's growing. Yeah, it's
it's
growing.
No, sad,
it's growing for sure. You know, we've had the likes of, you know, T.I. and Killer Mike come out to do rallies with us and things like that. You know, we've reached out to some other larger celebrities whose names I don't want to put out just yet because we're still working on roping them in. But the what's happening is the non-Muslim community is starting to reconnect. They didn't know. What's funny, we didn't realize they didn't know A$AP Brown was Imam Jamil. And so now they're reconnecting the dots and realizing like, oh man, that's crazy. He's still here. Like he's still alive. Like we just, for instance, with the Judas and the Black Messiah movie, again, my father's at the beginning of that. Like he's speaking as A$AP Brown at the beginning of that. And a lot of people have no idea that man is alive and struggling through one of the things that we just finished crying about watching Judas and the Black Messiah. It's like, if you're spurred to act after watching that movie, it's a guy you could act for at the beginning of that movie. But we just have to bring people back to realize that he's still here.
Like, I don't get that one part. Like, I mean, especially in light of this right now, BLM and activism, like there's nothing about him right now. And this man is like, I mean, if not one of the pioneers of all of this, like right now in America.
If you're on J. Edgar Hoover's, you're one of 4 people on his list, then that just tells you that you were making way. You know, you were a game changer, right?
You met Lyndon B. Johnson,
right?
You know what I mean? Like,
but not to mention that, but he was also considered one of the pioneers of rap music, and people associate him with one of the founders.
Man, I love that. I mean, no, but I'm gonna say this though. Did he ever? We were talking about this. We weren't sure. Did he have any interaction with Malcolm X at all? I mean, he was around a little bit. I mean, I know
like 20 years younger.
No, yeah, but he took the presidency of the Nonviolence Organization in '67. Malcolm X had in '65, but he's been involved since the '60s and '63 with civil rights. So, did your father have any interaction with Malcolm X?
Am I mute? No, I'm good. Yeah, I'm sure they run into each other. It wasn't a situation where they had opportunities to really work together and things like that. Because what a lot of people don't realize is Malcolm was killed really early on into his, you know, civil rights activism. He's a humongous icon, but they realized that early on and was like, we're going to take care of this quickly.
Yeah, in a lot of ways. That's why I was mentioning this, because in a lot of ways, they wanted to do to many other leaders what they did to Malcolm. Right. Yeah, and so it became a thing where it was not, if they couldn't get to you, at least the fear of that happening to you got to you.
Because Fred Hampton was only 21 when they killed him.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, and the thing, see, what they learned with my father, they learned from their mistakes with the Martins, Malcolms, and Fred Hamptons of the world with my father, as opposed to making him a martyr. I need to make sure.
KAIRI, can you repeat that? Your
legacy. So we allow B movies about those kind of things, like we've done for others who they killed, and so this is a way of killing him and killing his legacy, which is what I personally can't allow to happen.
Right. Well, we'll try to do our best, inshallah, with you to make sure.
I want to share something from the comments. So one of our listeners, Ali, he mentioned he's like I met Imam Jamil AL-AMIN in the mid '90s in the Cleveland Riyadh. It's a great way for Muslims to get together. He made the khutbah in the middle of the school's field. Good times. And he's like, another thing, when you see Imam Jamil in person, you automatically know he isn't 5'8". He's very tall. And then, his last comment was like, I don't get why the government wouldn't want Imam Jamil to be a leader for black people. He's a great man and very humble. I walked up to him and shook his hand. We had a great conversation. Anyone could walk up to him and speak.
Mashallah.
What a great way to close this broadcast off.
That's accurate.
Maha and KAIRI, do you have any closing words? Maybe we forgot something to ask, and perhaps this is a good time to mention anything we may have missed.
Well, we want to thank you for highlighting this story and bringing this issue to light. And we hope that other people follow in your footsteps. Like I said, definitely go to freeimamjamil.com. Just send the email. It's already written for you. It's literally copy paste. It will take you 2 minutes to request that he be transferred to Georgia. Be proactive. If you have political ties, reach out to us and let's see how we can use those political ties. If you have media ties and they want to cover this, reach out to us, because the idea now is to get the word out and to revive Imam Jamil's legacy and to know that he's still with us. So we need to advocate for his freedom. So again,
and for the young folks, if you have a platform, if you're TikTok popping right now, make a TikTok. If you're Insta popping right now, do something on Instagram. If you're so inclined, these are just extras that you can do, but this is the world we live in now. People have everybody has a platform somewhere. So if you create content, you're a content creator, please find a way to incorporate Imam Jamil H-Rap Brown into your content, because we want him to be a pop culture figure, because that's we stir change now. Pop culture kind of makes change happen. So we need to get him back into that.
No, you're right. We're in an age where revolutions start on Twitter.
And is there anything, and Sister Maha had brought up one of his books earlier, is there anything else that the folks who aren't familiar with him can do to read up on, like, the kind of work he's done in the past?
Yeah, definitely get this book. And then definitely, I recommend this book. It highlights the case, and, KAIRI has a statement in here. So these two books should
Revolution by the Book.
And Revolution by the Book by Imam Jamil, and The Imprisonment of Imam Jamil Abdullah Al-Amin, H-Rap Brown.
Yeah.
Awesome, inshallah. And those should be available at Amazon or any bookstore you happen to Google. So thank you guys for joining us this afternoon. Help us out on patreon.com/the Mad Mamluks. Alternatively, you can go to themadmamluks.com/donate, and make sure you click on like and subscribe. Leave a comment in the comment section below. Help us raise awareness around Imam Jamil. If you have any interesting stories like the one that Ali just had mentioned in the chat that we read off, make sure you put that in the comment section and help other people understand who this great human being was and who is. And will continue to be. So please spread the word, let people know how they can help in any way they can.
Yeah, one just final thing. Ramadan is coming. And so dua in Ramadan is important. So if you find it in your qiyam, don't underestimate dua. It's nice to write letters and big attention, but Allah is the one that handles all these affairs. So remember him in your dua, in your qiyam. Make sure you remember him, because that dua is powerful.
Yeah.
And just to you, KAIRI, when you speak to your father, if you can convey to our salams from us to him and to let him know that we're thinking of him and we're making dua of him, and we make dua that Allah reunites us with him very soon, inshallah.
I mean, inshallah. If you also, I didn't highlight KAIRI's website, which has a lot of information and has a lot of video clips that summarize this whole thing. So that is whathappenedto And it's interesting you say that. After that last clip that you played of Imam Jamil's voice, the other half of that, he says, when you ask Allah, and when you ask from Allah, ask for fardus. If there's anything that can change divine decree, it is dua. So those were actually the last words he said in that little clip of talk that's not on there. And dua is powerful, so please keep him in your dua, inshallah.
Thank you all for joining us. We'll see you all next time. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa rahmatullah.